So, Eve, I I I grew up playing video games. When I was a kid, we had the Ataris, and we had Qbert on the Atari. My dad had me and my sister would watch my dad play the submarine game that he would play on his desktop computer that he had. We got NES. We went through like the typical things. I remember when I was like an early teenager, I remember my dad and I having an argument, and he'll still bring it up to this day about how he didn't want me to watch or play Mortal Kombat. He was very like grossed out by that and very appalled by that because it at the time, I mean, it looks so antiquated now, but at the time, it was a little violent, and I think about that in terms of when we were looking at the landscape, and today we're talking about Roblox. If we're looking at the landscape then versus now, it was much easier to parse out where danger was or where
Hmm.
perceived danger was. So you could go see an arcade game, or you could visually see and go, oh, well, this looks a little too rough for my kid to watch. Even if we fast forward a little bit to like the Grand Theft Autos and any type of other games that were deemed like to be violent or controversial, there's a little bit of a visual understanding as to like at a glance to understand, oh, okay, well, this is a little dangerous. But now, what we're seeing with Roblox is it's the danger has become much, much more insidious. We're seeing this with Roblox and Fortnite and many other games. A lot of the Call of Duty and a lot of these other shooting games and any of these games that are online, where in this case of Roblox, they were having pedophiles able to get in, groom children, and then be able to move from the grooming of children to moving those activities into real life space, which is horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah. I can only, I can relate to what parents must be going through with the amount of, just avenues that kids can go down, right? I have kids. My oldest is 22. So I had my first child in 2002. Okay. And I didn't really have to worry about much. She wasn't like an iPad kid or anything like that.
Yeah,
I
there was
was
no
in tech.
iPad then, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It was really just us, with the phones, and, just kind of not really having to deal with anything. I would say probably around 2006, um, where things started to, YouTube started to kind of get into some sort of mainstream, right? It wasn't just
Mhm,
like 60 videos and the founders were complaining about how lame it was.
mhm.
But, what I did start to see pretty quickly is the internet was just open.
Yeah.
And so from like a content perspective, video games and the from like what you can control, was very much just an open field. And I believe that's where what we're talking about today is, yeah, how much control do you have over what your children are doing, while they're online?
Yeah, and, I don't have kids, so I don't have the experience of, like, having to parent or worry about parenting, a child through any of this type of space, but it is incumbent upon I imagine, being somebody who designs software, part of what we try to do is we try to think of our end users, and we try to think of people like yourself who are parents, or think of the children that use our products, and we try to think about the fact, like, how can we help them and, like, not harm them, right? And the patterns of both the addictive patterns of behavior that are being exploited and used, including the economy of that Roblox and the Robux, where they have to start to beg their parents for money
Yeah.
to spend on uh, basically what are like little, for lack of a better term, they're little skins or little paper, if paper doll accoutrements, hats, faces, whatever that you're going to put on your little Roblox character, which is akin to a Lego minifig, right? That's going to have, you're going to swap a different head onto it. But the way that they set up that economy, they didn't, no one thought of worst case scenarios. No one started having any awkward conversations. No one, I can't imagine anybody brought up to the CEO. Can you imagine a designer? Eve, I'd like to know, could you imagine a designer or someone on that team bringing up to the CEO, hey, we're afraid that our product is being exploited for child porn ahead of time?
Ahead of time, in America? Yeah, I mean, like, let's be honest. From a capitalistic standpoint, we do think about money first, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like we apologize later, right? And
Uh-huh.
I mean, I am not someone who deems capitalism as something, like bad. I think there are aspects to it that we should say, hey, this just doesn't make any sense, right? And so if it's hurting, people, children, let's figure that out. So if we can look at fringe cases, like how we would talk to the CEO or any stakeholder who's designing a video game where could you predict that? Maybe. But from a reactive standpoint, we are definitely on the reactive, right? Look at
Exactly.
how we are, right? Instead of being proactive. Now, maybe it was on some backlog somewhere. I don't know. We'd have to, if there's anybody who is willing to talk to us that knows that, I wonder if there was somewhere that this was documented prior.
You probably, I would bet anything because I see it on games that I play online, where I would bet content moderation is expensive, right? It's super expensive. It's part of the reason that they're trying to go to automation. Even YouTube just had a blow up recently about the content moderation and how they're relying on bots instead of human beings to deal with their content moderation. And so
Mm.
therefore the rules are now very inconsistent. But I can imagine somebody saying, hey, Roblox, people are making, Nazi people in Roblox, or people
Mm.
are doing X, Y, and Z in Roblox. And I can imagine the complaints not being taken seriously. And I wonder why. I wonder what the why is, why those complaints might not have been taken seriously, or why they may have ended up in the backlog.
I have a theory.
Yeah, tell me.
And that's only because, I have children. They're all girls. And they've played these games. And I know how my kids can get,
Yes.
right? And if we relate to us being children,
Yes,
what we do is we test the boundaries. So my kids have
totally.
tried to go in, test the boundaries and break the system and see like, hey, can we get kicked off? Right? This is how we are, right? This is like how children are.
Mhm.
How many times could I say the word gay before I get banned on, a chat bot?
Mhm.
I know my kids have done that. I've talked to them about that. Like, what are you doing? Right. And they're goofing off. They're being, dumb. Right. They're
Mhm.
just, trying to figure out like, hey, where are the boundaries? And they do this with
Totally.
parents and see
Totally.
like how much can I get away with? Now, I don't know if that was just kids' behavior doing that, or if it really was like the sinister type of behavior where adults are coming in and trying to, just ruin a child. Um, but at least from that standpoint, it could have been obviously kids goofing off, trying to figure out, hey, where are the guardrails around this thing? Like, how many times can I say a cuss word before they bleep it out or kick me off or, whatever they do.
That's so interesting because, right, because we know that this did have real life consequences and that there were real adults that were doing this. But
Hmm.
I think the point that you're making, which is an interesting one to think about in online spaces, which is that yes, children are kind of assholes and children will push boundaries and will purposefully do things that are provocative because oftentimes they don't have a full understanding of consequences, right? And so, so I could imagine listening to that and hearing you say that. That kind of complicates a couple of things further that we can kind of stuff out, which is that one, it makes it for the moderation harder for both the bots if you're using a bot and a bot is trying to determine you know, the context as to what is happening. I could imagine a bot not understanding the context of um, somebody doing something that is a historical, maybe they're doing a historical recreation of something or another versus versus it being a you know, so like a historical World War II battle scene as an example versus understanding what the meaning of the swastika is, right, or something like
Right.
that.
Sure.
um I but that's where it also like is incumbent upon those companies to be able to have, you know, been able to get proactive in terms of behavior and how people are and what people are doing online and what's being allowed to be spread onto these spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the reason why I brought that up is it just creates more noise. And that noise, um, just it needs to be dealt with appropriately. And I think, um, how do you do that well? I think that's where being proactive helps, right? Like when you develop an app, like Brian and I have done, developing a web platform. One of the reasons we try to figure out what the personas do is to see who we're designing this for, right?
Yeah,
And within that scenario of figuring out who these people are, um, we design an MVP. We design something that can be used and tested, so it can, go on the Google Store or wherever in order to see like the engage interest. So one of those being, these fringe cases sometimes do go off into a backlog and get dusty, right? Because backlogs are, generally 100 items deep, and it was always emphasized from a software development standpoint to fail fast. Everybody's probably
hmm,
heard that in some scenario. I think we're in a very great position where we don't need to fill up a backlog anymore because of the power of how we can create apps with AI that are more foolproof. We don't have to get into this today, but that we're just kind of discussing the scenario of where we've come from. And I think that's where those backlog items were being prioritized is huge, right? Are we waiting for a problem to happen, or should we be proactive in saying, this is a high priority for us so that we don't get sued or we don't put people in danger? And I don't know why that doesn't feel like a priority until
yeah.
something happens.
It makes me think of a time where I was working on a product at another company that I was working with, and I had a PM who's a wonderful, that's product manager for people that are listening. Wonderful PM, like a wonderful guy, very, very smart, but was new to accessibility and did not understand the need for accessibility within our apps. And I will never forget, we went, the app we were using was a car app,
Yeah.
and we went for a test drive in, we went to go sit with the people that were using our apps, and we got to witness them using our apps while they were driving around the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
And that changed their mind real quick about accessibility when they could see drivers fumbling around with the app, you know. But that
And you being seated in the vehicle, the creator, it's like, oh, this was just a couple milliseconds delay and we could have gotten ourselves into big trouble here. Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
But it speaks to the whole point of like that how many of the Roblox, or how much money did any of the Roblox staff put into research, put into hiring UX folks, put into like discovering those problems? And then B, why aren't these businesses getting ahead of this problem? Like, this goes back to kind of the overall, if we talk about capitalism, how many, I believe in that video that you and I kind of like saw, there are big brands that got involved with Roblox. I think there was like Prada, and I think there were some other big, like, I mean, big brands you'll see in the mall, or brands that people wear like every day, right?
Yeah.
I almost, and they got involved and so to think of like, would you want your brand positioned next to in a space where you know that there are people that where there are child predators
Yeah.
around? Like, I can't believe that Roblox wouldn't have prioritized that.
To take a different spin on like the
Yeah.
forward thinking of where we're going with product design, and not necessarily just that, but software development, is we can be more proactive. This isn't, taking the design team, the UX strategy, and putting it at the forefront of your product lifecycle and saying we need to do a little bit more of this user testing and user research prior to handing anything off to development. I know it feels unheard of, but at this point, because of what I have products called the UX Blueprint that incorporates a AI prototype code base. Our team can now develop products in a fraction of the time, actually a fraction of the cost, and decrease your bugs and defects just because of how quickly we can move and suss out information based on like our, what we have in our platform, like what we've given AI in its library. I've basically created a Claude into a framework that has components, and now we can start actually focusing on what matters, which isn't necessarily just the interface, but now the research and the fringe cases and how we can prevent, dire things from happening.
Yeah, I know we don't want to kind of get off on a tangent on AI, but yeah, I mean, the one of the benefit talking about AI is going to be a whole like longer topic for another conversation. But
Absolutely,
yeah,
yeah.
but I think what you are driving at is that one of the reasons that we're starting to see a lot of these big companies are trying to adopt AI, and we're seeing those pilots fail. And the reason that we're seeing a lot of those pilots fail has to do with the fact that a lot of them believe that they can make giant purchases, or they can buy AI, they could just set it for and forget it, and they can go about their day. And we see the same thing happened 10 years ago with cloud, when everyone started doing their cloud integrations and everybody started bringing in consultancies to come in and train up their folks onto how to move their infrastructures from on-prem to off-prem and into AWS and all these other systems. And what we saw was they started with the developers, as they always do, and then they work backwards and start to work into product design and user experience design. And I think right now the biggest opportunity for these players that have done these giant purchases of these AI suites is now they're going to have to work backwards, and now they're going to have to work backwards to start hiring up a lot more UX people, a lot more product designers
Oh yeah.
to integrate and to get everything together, and also probably to kill off a lot of AI products that are nonsense, that are not actually solving their problems, that consume too much energy, are building data centers that are not going to do jack shit for them, and frankly are in many ways some of the AI tools are putting them into legal liability. And because they don't have UX people or AI people, they don't have UX people or design people there to like walk them through this.
Yeah.
They're really putting themselves in a huge amount of jeopardy.
And so if we just kind of even take a step back from there, it's how we can incorporate, and why I bring this up is how we can actually be more preventable, right? We
Yeah.
can because of how AI now can take requirements that aren't being lost in some confluence page somewhere that
Yeah.
no one's reading. AI is now having that in its framework and knows, like, here is the governance, here are the guardrails, right? Are you going to develop a video game? Here's just the basic foundation. So you can protect children, you can make an awesome, usability case, and obviously create something fun and entertaining. But that to me is like key, is obviously, you know, breaking new ground. We don't Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right?
Mhm.
And I think with what we do know, we can now protect anyone that's going to start creating, let's say, a gaming framework, a platform that, you want certain things done to it. And so these are all things that are documented and can be fed into a system where it isn't something getting lost. See, that's what happens, especially with platform design or app design, is sometimes you have this one, and you see it in memes. You got the web developer that's been here for 10, 15 years. He shows up once in a while. You never see him online, right? And yet he knows where all the bodies are buried. Right.
Mhm.
We don't need that anymore. Like, we don't need people like that. What we have is we can be proactive where those frameworks, those requirements, those profiles can be shared, and we can start to build better products, because those are lessons learned that we can be more preventable versus reactive to.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this too, but part of in the first episode that you and I did together, we kind of talked a little bit about how designers and UX people, we tend to be we're not the yes men, you know? We're not the
Never.
people that are just we're not never going to be the people that are
We're
just
the
going to
it,
be
it
like
depends people.
uh we're the why people first, right? Like we're the
Yeah.
why, and then we're the no, right? um as Mike Montero says. I like his saying of like our designers are the two best words we can say is why and no, And I think that, you know, it's awkward to go into a meeting and imagine, like I can imagine somebody talking about Roblox, and I can imagine all the CEO and and all the people in the C-suite being like, "Fuck yes, this will make our CFO so happy to hear that we're going to have ways for people to spend money on this application," right?
Sure.
I can also imagine somebody raising their hand in the back and being like, "Hey, this could probably be exploited, right? Or what if this, what if that?" And I think it's unfortunate that oftentimes when there are naysayers in the room who are not conforming to the CFO or conforming to what a board of directors wants, um, they are often shown the door or told to shut the fuck up because we're going to move and push ahead anyway. And I think that how people need to start thinking about that, especially people in the C-suite, is they need to have more naysayers in the room to be able to help them to turn down the risk, right, and de-risk the products that they're going to release, so that you don't
Absolutely.
have these billion to multi-million dollar settlements, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, we have workshops that can validate and help
Yeah.
with that, right? So there are like instances, and I'm sure Brian can attest to this too, where we are only going to be creative. And there
Hmm.
is, no, let's say, naysayer in the room, but this is just an open ground of, a no judgment zone. Let's let's throw on the wall some, just
Blue
a
sky.
whiteboarding, right?
Yeah.
And you just start to kind of think through scenarios that you think this app would be beneficial for an app or a platform. And then, once we kind of get that spaghetti thrown on the wall, whatever sticks, then the requirements and things that we can start to say, what is it that we can do? What can't we do? What's a nice to have? What's a must have? Right. And those are all workshops that the strategic UXer would help you prioritize and get in order. All of this is a part of, just the design process, um, and really just helps create, badass applications. I mean, this is what we
Mhm.
do. That's why there are companies that are extremely successful, is they've started to implement design at the beginning of their strategy.
One of the big problems that we're seeing here with Roblox and with several other of these video game platforms, there's multiple problems, right? There's scaling moderation. There's um, there's the children that are getting in and either having there's abuse happening, but there's also indoctrination to some really disturbing ideologies happening as well that we're seeing with especially with young boys, right? So if I were to, if what would be your first steps if if the C-suite from one of these big video games companies were to call you up as and say, hey, we're thinking about hiring you on as a director of UX here. What should be our first, or what should be some steps for us to take, or what should be our plan of action?
And the goal would be the content moderation.
Yeah, I would say probably the content moderation, or what would be our first steps towards trying to handle, like address some of these problems? What would be some of your first steps?
I think what I would do is I do an audit, a UX audit of like the main problems and feedback that's being received. So if we are looking at a feedback tool, probably a survey tool, maybe customers reaching out and filing complaints, we look at that first and really weight those based on um, what's being said. So if we are seeing a reoccurring pattern of multiple or tens of hundreds of people mentioning this one issue, that would be number one priority, right? And so we'd look at that issue first and start to see within the application how it's being demonstrated, right? And so we would go look at user behavior, what is happening, have those as evidence, right? Because what I like to do is have data to back up why we would create these design changes in the first place. So um, that's how I would proceed to help prioritize customer feedback and complaints, and then actually video with video evidence what's happening within the platform that is backing up these cases.
If you were in the shoes of Roblox specifically, and you have specifically, it's now been validated that this is like there have been multiple cases of like child abuse happening through this platform, and you exploit it through this platform. Ignore. So just, I love, yeah, 100% with agree with like the idea of data and tackling it from that point of view. But like let's imagine now that you've gone through that and you've processed that.
Sure.
What do you think? What do you think would be, or what would be the action that you would want taken, both as a UX designer and as a director of UX and as a parent? What would you hope
I mean, if there's
to happen?
kids in danger, right? Like from bullying, and maybe it's like just kids messing around, which I think a lot of it is. I would honestly just block those users immediately until we figure out, is this a actual predator, or are these just, young kids messing around that the parents need to know what's happening, right? I mean, I just take it as what public school does, right? They
Yeah,
generally suspend people, right? And I think that's okay. You have to have consequences for your behavior online. If you're just a kid messing around trying to figure out where the guardrails are and how you can like mess with people and laugh, there's consequences, right? At the same time, when there's a predator, I mean, that's like a whole different case, right? That's when you get you reporting involved and getting, what am I trying to say? Like the police involved.
yeah,
And so that's just a different scenario. But I
yeah,
think what happens is the noise of it. You have to figure out, where is this an actual risk, or are these just kids? And what do you do about that, right? Which is something temporary that you can almost teach a lesson. That to me is huge. To teach
yeah,
people, especially kids, young kids, they need to know there are consequences for your behavior all the time.
yeah.
I think we've gotten too lax on that. Where in
I
school,
agree.
it's like, I don't know if people are getting suspended anymore, right? Like if it's we were afraid of our teachers and our principal. Like we knew we were in big trouble if we were doing something wrong. Our parents were involved. They there was like definitely consequences at home that would happen. I think all of
Yeah,
that still makes sense in this type of scenario where it's a public platform and people will get arrested. That could be even something that's stated plainly.
I agree. I
Yeah,
agree. I think proactive. I think that's a great idea. I think being really proactive and even being maybe even being a little more aggressive than is necessary, or than is not
sure.
necessary, but than is accustomed today. I think, yeah, I think why not? Like have them take the approach of being um uh treating it more like schools and having the same type of behavioral expectations.
I don't
Yeah,
even know
totally
why
agree.
that's even, like, such a, novel idea.
Gonna
Like,
be.
this is something that should just have been incorporated, right? Like, it worked on our generation. I mean, where did we go wrong? Why is this so lax now?
Yeah. Cool.
Any other final thoughts? I know we're gonna wrap up here.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna just say this. I think video gaming, one of the things I think video gaming can be great. I think video gaming can be great for problem solving skills. It can be great for there's a game I play that I enjoy that um is it's a war game where you have to communicate and you have to talk to people to form strategies. And I think there's so much potential with games to be able to um add communication, add to like learning, add to like spatial awareness and math skills and like creative skills. Um, and I hate the fact that there have been a lot of toxic elements that have come into it that have perpetrated it. And I wish, you know, Mortal Kombat, for all of the things that my dad may have not wanted me to go play, there was community around. Back in the day when we were younger, there were communities around going to the arcade and hanging out with your friends and like being in a space where like you were like skating or doing some other type of activity too, like. And I hate that we it seems like we're kind of losing the fun and the joy out of this thing with all this toxicity.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
Anything? Do you want to add anything as a final
Um,
note?
I do not. I
Okay.
think there's a lot. I've been actually trying to not get into too many, just rabbit holes here because there's so
Yeah.
many ways that we
Oh,
can take
totally.
this.
Oh my God, yes. Oh yeah. So we should do this. Uh, wrap this up.
Like, subscribe, and follow, or become our next victim of bad UX.
UX Murder Mystery is a joint production of Eve, User Experience Design Agency, and CrowleyUX, where systems meet stories. It's hosted by Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Edited by Kelsey Smith. Intro animation and logo design by Brian J. Crowley. The music is by Nicolas Lee. You can follow us at UX Murder Mystery. You can email us at questions@uxmurdermystery.com. UX Murder Mystery is a copyright 2025, Brian J. Crowley and Eve Eden. Thanks for listening.